Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Can you please give us a context of the school lives that children with additional needs have? There is a tendency to assume that everything is working well and that this July provision debate comes in an extreme circumstance, and that's why we're discussing it. Can you speak to the reality of parents who can't find a school place? Can you speak to the waiting lists that are there for basic interventions that can often be as long as 5 years? I have documentation here from constituents of mine who one of them has a daughter aged 6 who's been on the waiting list for 2 years for basic intervention. She has autism, and the letter in black and white from the HSE says that the waiting list for Beach Park services is 5 years long. Can you speak to the fact that many parents go from school to school to school to school, try to get a school place and can be turned down and are turned down? Can you speak to the number of times that the Minister has actually invoked his right under the Admissions Act to instruct the school to open a unit? Can you speak to the fact that the Department of Education, because of the constitutional reality, abdicates its responsibility and puts the onus on parents to find a school for their children, and that CNOs actually hand a list of schools to parents and basically abandon them at that point? And we do have parents who have been to 15, 16, 17, 18 schools. Can you speak to the fact that parents become campaigners when they don't want to be campaigners? They need the state to defend them, to protect them, and to care for them. And what happens is a huge level of exhaustion, because at one point, obviously, you're dealing with a challenge in your own family life of somebody with a diagnosis that you have to deal with and you have to learn about. And overnight, you become a campaigner at the same time for services that aren't there.
Personally, I completely agree with
my time gone over
where you're going, but I would just remind you that it's maybe about COVID-19 response specifically rather than the broader issue of services.
Okay, I accept that.
And I'm not seeking to take away from the very valid points.
Well, then I'll bring it back to that context, if I will. Yeah. That given that current context of the deficiency of services and state provision for children with additional needs, how do you reflect on how, not just in terms of July provision, but in terms of school returning in September, how these issues can be addressed long term?
It's a difficult piece, and I'd agree with everything that the Deputy has said. I'm aware of a lot of the issues that are in your own constituency, and even as recently as last week, I met with a group of parents from Intact Autism. They're in Dublin 2, 4 and 6, I believe, and the provision for their children is virtually non-existent. And that brings it back to the piece where the Minister has asked the NCSE to prepare reports in relation to those schools and what kind of provision is there. And it simply hasn't happened because of the COVID-19. Now, you might argue that it wasn't happening anyway and it should have happened in years gone by. But it simply hasn't happened because of COVID-19. Just addressing the other issue from the Deputy around the waiting lists, absolutely, waiting lists for vital therapy services. And going back to what we've previously addressed, the research will tell you, that people will always make gains in life with treatment, absolutely. But for children with disabilities, there is a golden window of opportunity in that 3 to 6 where you can make significant gains. As my colleague Lorraine Dempsey has said, a lot of these therapists have been put into which are very vital roles in contact tracing and COVID-19 testing and so forth. We'd urge that those folks are redeployed as we seem to have flattened the curve in Ireland. But what that's going to tell us is that waiting lists have just got longer and longer and longer. And these therapy services, while in an ideal world they should be delivered face to face, we've engaged with various therapists to provide information to families on our Facebook Live page and what they can do during the COVID period. And some of those guys are telling us, you know, and these are people at the forefront of physiotherapy and occupational therapy and psychology. They're saying that a lot of this can be delivered in a virtual manner, because a lot of the programs they deliver, you know, if they're familiar with, you know, their patient or the child that's experiencing their services, you know, they can give instructions and exercises to the parent who can then go and carry them out. So, look, the waiting lists certainly haven't improved during the COVID period. They were diabolic to begin with. But we would say that, you know, if there's proper innovation through proper telehealth, you know, a lot more children can be seen than have been previously.
Thank you.